participants. Here we go. Admit all. Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our VBC Scuttlebutt for this Monday, October 14th. My name is Todd DiPastino. I am the director of the Veterans Breakfast Club, and this is our weekly conversation where we talk about all things military and relating to the veterans community and military history. And once a month, we like to do an open conversation. That is, you bring the topics, you bring the questions, I bring some topics, certainly, and some questions. And people have been doing that with me all this past week. So we have quite a few topics and a lot to cover this evening, especially pertaining to the Navy, because yesterday was the 249th birthday of the United States Navy. It's a little fuzzy on when the Navy was actually born. It was multiple births, Glenn. Did you realize that? The Navy was born not once, but twice, and maybe even three times.
No, I did not know that, but I've already gotten a couple of people commenting on your article and how good it was, how original it was, and it's going to lead me to actually read it as well.
And what article is that, Glenn?
Article on the birth of the Navy.
Oh, about John Paul Jones.
I'm sorry, about John Paul Jones.
Yeah, it's not really on the birth of the Navy. It's about John Paul Jones and how your man, Teddy Roosevelt, kind of rehabilitated the ghost of John Paul Jones to serve as an appropriate model for the kind of aggressive, assertive global Navy that he had in mind for creating in the early 20th century. It was really a case of finding a usable past for TR.
Yet John Paul Jones was not all that he was made out to be.
Oh my gosh, he was a murderer who was on the run, who changed his name. He came to North America under the name of Jones, I think, to escape a murder trial, and ended up, they just about the same time at the Continental Congress was creating a Navy, and he was a mariner. He went into the Navy and wasn't so great. He was much hated, but then had a few daring exploits on the other side of the Atlantic, which made him famous for a brief time. And then after the war, he left. He became an officer in the Russian Navy. And then died in obscurity. I think he was accused of raping a girl and had to escape another charge, and then died in obscurity in France. And it was Teddy Roosevelt who really kind of rehabilitated his legend.
His image more than anything else.
Of his image, yeah, for the purposes of kind of promoting this new assertive Navy. So that's just one Navy story here, at least a piece of Navy history. But we do have, I believe, Rich Pescatore, who's with us from Beverly, Massachusetts. He's going to give us another sample of some stories from the founding of the Navy. I see we have Eric Grabowsky. I'm very glad that he's with us. Hopefully his dad, Ralph, is with us also. Eric is going to give us an update on the research that he and his dad have been doing about little David, which was one of the largest, if not the largest by caliber, guns ever produced in the tail end of World War II. And I think maybe there was only one produced by Meston Machine and Homestead. We'll get into that history. We have Walt Brinker with us, I see. Walt, thank you for joining us, Walt. He is a graduate of the United States Military Academy, the famous class of 1966, a platoon leader in the 173rd Airborne in Vietnam, and then did a second tour as a company commander in the 1st Cavalry Division. Walt took issue with what we have discussed and posted about the famous bandolier with the M60 machine gun bullets on the 3 servicemen statue in Washington, D.C., how they're pointing the wrong way. Walt says they should never have been wearing bandoliers in the first place. They never would have been wearing bandoliers. But first, I want to and we have Chris Perollo. I have some wonderful photos of him. We have Don Nemchek. We have a lot of good Navy veterans here. I'm at a Baymont Hotel in West Harrisburg because we have a breakfast tomorrow at Fort Indiantown Gap. And it is Fort Indiantown Gap is the headquarters of the Pennsylvania National Guard. It's an old World War II training facility and has been for many, many years. And we're having Rocky Blyer speak to a large crowd of about 150. I'm going to see Mark Spirdigliosi there. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Todd. How are you today, sir?
Good. It'll be good to see you again in person.
Yes, it'll be good to see you also.
And
It's been a while.
it has been a while, and it'll be wonderful to have Rocky Blyer's story shared. I see Renee Gefkin. We're going to be talking to her, and Nancy Smoyer. We're going to be talking to her. Nancy, did you just return or recently return from the Netherlands, World War II battlefields tour?
Yes, I did. I was there with the World War II Memorial Tour, and it was led by Alex Kershaw, who's written a lot of books about World War II.
Yeah, he's almost as good a historian as Glenn.
He's written a couple more books than I have, yeah.
That must have been wonderful, Nancy.
Yeah, it was. It was a great tour, and I missed the Market Basket meeting that you had here because I was in Eindhoven at the time on Liberation Day. I was in Eindhoven, and then we went to a lot of other of the sites. It was only a week long, but we packed a lot in, and we got all the way to Remagen, the bridge there, and then stopped.
Oh, how wonderful. And this is for people, just to remind people, Operation Market Garden was the failed attempt to circumvent the, Glenn, help me out here, the Siegfried line.
Siegfried line, yeah.
Right. Make it into Germany in September 1944. British, Polish, U.S. paratroopers dropped to seize a bunch of bridges that would then allow the 30th, was it the 30th Battle Group?
30th Corps of the British Second Army.
30th Corps to make its way from this blue line, front line here, all the way to Arnhem and then around the Siegfried line and crossing the Rhine and around the Siegfried line. Eindhoven was the first major town, I think, on the 30th Corps' route to be liberated. Liberation Day, I think, is either September 17th or 18th, Nancy. And it's a big deal, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a big deal. And yeah, they had a ceremony with lots of speeches in Dutch, almost all. And there was a color guard from the 101st Airborne that was there and played all the national anthems from Great Britain, America, Holland, Netherlands, and France. And yeah, it was great. It was really a wonderful experience to be there. And the first place we went to was the farm behind which the 101st paratroopers dropped. And that was really cool to see. Think that, yes, they dropped in that field. And
I'm sorry, Nancy.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, there's scenes in Band of Brothers, I think the third or fourth episode, which is about them dropping near Eindhoven, that are just classic scenes that recreate, so much of what you saw, and scenes of them trying to eventually go through Eindhoven with the 30th Corps tanks and jeeps and so forth, and they basically couldn't make it through because they were mobbed by the locals.
Yeah.
We were told that the priest there told the congregation the day before not to leave their homes and even maybe stay in the cellars of their homes the next day. And so they knew what was coming. And the resistance in the middle of the night went out into the field there that had high grass, and they cut down the fences so that the gliders could land without running into the fences. Yeah, it was just amazing. And one of the things that Alex Kershaw said is that both Band of Brothers and also A Bridge Too Far are very accurate. And so that's good to know that when you watch those movies, you're seeing pretty much the real thing.
Nancy, we did a similar tour in 2018 with the Veterans Breakfast Club. We did a tour that was in Eindhoven on Liberation Day. It was unforgettable. And one of the things that made it unforgettable is that there were 5 or 6 World War II veterans there being honored in the evening ceremony. Were there any this year for the 80th?
Not that stand out in my mind, I should say.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there were
Yeah.
some. Yeah.
Well,
I highly recommend going and looking at these battlefields. I mean, we went to the bridges, the Nijmegen and Bastogne. We went Bastogne for the Battle of the Bulge, and then Remagen, as I mentioned, Oosterbeek. Yeah. And one of the really cool things, I think everybody's pretty much aware has heard that the people in Holland, the Netherlands, to be more correct, have adopted the graves of the Americans that in the 2 graveyards there. And I was talking to a cashier at one of the places, and I said, sort of somewhat casually, do you have a grave yourself there that you've adopted? And she said, oh, of course, we all do. Everybody does. There's a waiting list. There's a waiting list of 200 some, and the families inherit those graves. They're passed on to them. It's really touching.
oh, wonderful. Glenn, should we mention that we're doing the trip in 2025?
Yes, I think you ought to officially announce it.
Yeah, we are doing just that tour that you took, Nancy, with the Veterans Breakfast Club. A much better historian than Alex. Glenn Flickinger will be leading it. I will be his wingman, and we'll be traveling from London to Southampton and Portsmouth, across the Channel to Normandy, then to Eindhoven, Arnhem, Luxembourg, Bastogne. Maybe I'm looking for one overnight in Heidelberg, and we'll end the trip in Munich and Eagle's Nest. So it'll be a 2-week trip. We'll be leaving August 27th. This is almost confirmed. All these details. We have some details left to confirm, so we haven't released it yet, but we're pretty darn close to releasing the details.
Yeah, it ought to be very, very interesting. Hopefully, I can measure up to a fraction of Alex Kershaw.
Yeah, really, you're on the boy. Okay, well, yeah, it's gonna be. You better study up.
I started reading up last night. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Hey, while I have you, Glenn, Thursday night we have a special program that is a screening of a documentary.
Yeah. This comes out of a program we did earlier this year. People might remember it, with a man named Rick Martini, whose father, Rick Martini, was one of these lost airmen of Buchenwald. He wrote a book called Betrayal that we discussed at that program. There were 168 airmen, both American and British, that in the spring of 1944, summer of 1944, ended up in Buchenwald for lots of different reasons that are in Rick's book and now in this documentary. This documentary was filmed in 2008, 2009. The producer is a man named Mike Dorsey, who I was on the phone with today, with our great friend Marilyn Walton, who's been the great friend of the BBC and a source for all this. His grandfather was one of the lost airmen of Buchenwald, which is how he got interested in the project. He's a very accomplished filmmaker. This won a prize at Normandy back at that time for best military documentary for that year. I can't remember the exact name of the prize. So yeah, it ought to be real interesting. You have to register for this program. Please remember to register. We have how many so far, Todd?
We have about 65 people registered, and I'm going to put the registration link here in the chat for everybody.
Great.
Yeah, so this will be a film screening, 7 p.m. Eastern. It's a 90-minute film, and then we will and that will be closed. That will not be live streamed on YouTube and Facebook. But the conversation afterwards with the filmmaker and with the other participants will be streamed on Facebook and YouTube. All right. Thank you very much, Glenn. That is Thursday night, October 17th. So yesterday was the birthday of the United States Navy, the official birthday. The Navy was officially born on October 13th, 1775, when the Second Continental Congress voted to commission a swift sailing vessel to carry 10 carriage guns and a proportionable number of swivels, whatever they are, with 80 men to be fitted with all possible dispatch for a cruise of 3 months. What are swivels? I'm asking our group here. Raise your hand, put it in the chat. What the heck are they talking about? What are swivels? I bet Chris Parolo knows, so I'm going to unmute him. Oh, of course he knows. He has his hand up. Hey, Chris.
Hey, hi. Good evening, everybody. I don't know for sure, but I've got to bet that has to be a small gun attached topside that they can fire a small shot from and just move it 180 degrees to do that.
Oh, got it. That makes sense. That makes sense. Justin from Dallas. How are you, Justin?
Fine. He's pretty much correct. They were mounted on the bow and on the sides, and it was one they could move from place to place. And usually, well, the originals were breech loaders, so it was one shot, then loaded, then one shot. And as they got a little down the road, it became more like having a very hard to fire M60 on a single shot M60 on a little pedestal.
So it's a swivel gun is what they're referring to.
They could turn it 180 degrees, and it would traverse 180 degrees, and it would go from above level to right down the side of the ship.
Oh, that's neat. Okay, and I'm going to share a picture of one just now. I looked it up quickly. That absolutely clarifies this. Okay, there it is. There's a swivel gun mounted on an American topsail schooner, which would have been one of the first Navy ships, the Hannah, right? Rich Pescatore, right. We'll be getting into that. So this is a swivel gun. Okay, thank you. That
it's like a mini cannon.
It's like a mini cannon, right?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, you know, there's a great book I'd recommend on this topic, and it's a man that we interviewed a couple of years ago, Ian Toll, the naval writer. His very first book is a book called Six Frigates, and it's about the original 6 frigates, including the USS Constitution, that was authorized to be built by Congress under John Adams. I think it was John Adams.
Correct. That was the second, or maybe the third founding of the United States Navy in 1794. Right. After the U.S. Constitution. Doug Dorr put into the chat here, man, do we have a smart group of members in the Veterans Breakfast Club. Swivel guns were small caliber cannons that could be maneuvered around at least 270 degrees. Doug is one of the most knowledgeable people about military history, and the military in general is just absolute. I had the great pleasure of, and Glenn did too, of traveling with Doug on our World War II tour of English airfields last month, and learned as much from him as we did, I think, from everywhere else that we saw. So, Chris Parolo, I'm going to ask you to unmute, and then I'm going to ask you if you remember this guy.
Oh, geez. Oh, yes. Well, I have a vague memory of that guy. He's changed a lot since then, but I have a vague memory of this guy. Yes.
Chris, today is a really important anniversary, and I mean that in all seriousness. This is the 50th anniversary of you joining the Navy or becoming active duty in the Navy.
This is 50 years ago. I got in the van and headed downtown, and from downtown to the airport, and from the airport to Chicago, and from Chicago to the doorstep of Recruit Training Center, Great Lakes, Illinois.
What made you join?
Well, I half jokingly tell everybody I wanted to run away, and there was no circus in town, so the Navy was the next best option.
The Navy was the closest circus you had.
I guess, yeah, it was the closest circus I could find. Yes.
What was it, the kind of thing where you had always kind of dreamed of joining the Navy, or was it that you didn't want to sleep in dirt, you wanted something better than the Army?
No, it wasn't that. It was always the service of my choice because of the adventure, because of the fact that the Navy went everywhere. It was I really believed in it's not a career, it's an adventure. And it was always my service of preference, no matter what. So it was just a matter of time before I made the decision. I was motivated by, well, I actually quit college. I was old when I went to the Navy. I was 21.
Yeah.
And I quit college and decided that's it, I'm going to go. But I quit college because of a busted romance. That was a stupid thing to do. And I wanted to get out of town because my father had a business there and I didn't want to be in the business anymore.
Isn't that
So
great?
I said, oh, this is it. I'm going. Everything's falling apart. I'm leaving.
And did
Uh,
it work out for you?
yes, no, it did. I had 3 years of active duty and the rest reserve. I got 21 years in. I'm having that nice check every month. Um, and the adventure and the friends and everything, it was everything I expected. Yes.
It was everything you expected, and it sounded like one of the things that you were after was kind of we might say a reset, pushing the reset
Yes.
button, getting away from the broken relationship, the family business that you really didn't want to be a part of, getting away from home, probably, maybe getting out of college, and having some adventure and some experience before you got back to civilian life.
Exactly and that's what it amounted to. And I figured, well, do a couple more years in the reserve. Your obligation is over and you go. But things were so good back here. The crew I fell in with here at the Pittsburgh Navy Reserve Center, the idea that you could, for 2 weeks, disappear back into the Navy and do the training and go to different places. The training once a month was not strenuous. It was we had a mission and things like that, but it was I just liked that. And one thing led to another. And next thing you know, you're over 10 years and you say you might as well stay for the rest.
Yeah.
And I did that. I did that. This is it's my fault for sending this, so I shouldn't say it. This is a terrible picture. I was there from October. Well, obviously, you know that. We started October 14th, and we were there right through the week before Christmas. So this was probably somewhere in November, and that's the Navy pea coat and the utilities that we were wearing then, and my good old watch cap.
Oh, a watch cap.
Good
That's
old
what it's
watch
called.
cap.
Is that what it's called in the Navy? A watch cap?
Yes, yes, that's
Okay.
the only name I know it by. It's called a watch cap because you would wear it outdoors, and you'd wear it if you were like on the signal bridge or any watch that you were standing outside on the deck at night or in the winter or when in cold weather.
That's such a coincidence, Chris. Last night I heard somebody refer to that kind of a cap, which I would call a knit cap, as a watch cap, and I was not familiar with the term, and you just explained it to me. So thank you very much.
And it's not anything military. This is a basic watch cap that any mariner would wear, even merchant marine or something like that. But
Yeah.
this is what they call it, a watch cap. So I'm standing there in a watch cap. This is when I got this in the pea coat there. This is when I got home. I had to take this picture because I was never in better shape than the week after I got home from boot camp. And I don't know what my weight was there, but there was more muscle than fat than ever before. And it was all downhill after this.
Did you have to take a swim test in the Navy boot camp?
Oh my God. I didn't know you were going to go there, but oh my God, I left it on another thing. I had my bathing suit here. I was going to show it to you just by coincidence here. I had to take a swim test. And here's the worst part. They say you're in the Navy, so they assume you can swim. I never could swim, and I don't swim now. But I got through the Navy, 21 years of the Navy. But the swim test is a story I tell just for amusement. Because I couldn't swim, and I tried to learn before I left here at Linton School here in Penn Hills. I took lessons, but it just wasn't going to work out. I get to the Navy, and you do the swim test, and they take you in a room, and they issue you a bathing suit. They take you in the room, and they tell you all the fundamentals of life saving. In other words, how to inflate your dungarees, tie them off, throw them over your shoulder there, put air in the pant legs, and then use them like water wings, and all these other tricks on how to use your uniform as a flotation device. And they show you a film. Now you suit up and you go out, and you have to go up on a 15-foot platform, go to the edge, drop yourself, brace yourself like this, and go feet first into 15 feet of water. And the whole idea is, and you go toes first, because you want to break the water and you want to protect your face against any debris that might be there. You want to break the water and protect your face from any flame or debris that you might be landing in. So that was the test. Well, I couldn't swim, but I was so afraid that they would set me back or the failure of it here that I wasn't going to tell them I couldn't swim. So I'm in line, climbed up on the platform, and they tell you outright, they say, hey, when you get to the edge of the platform, tell the person if you can swim or not. You're going in the water no matter what, but tell them if you can swim or not. Well, you take step by step. The guy goes off in front of you. The guy goes off in front of you. Finally, it's my turn. So I stood there on the edge of the platform, 15 feet above the water, 15 feet of water. And the guy says, can you swim? And without hesitation, I said yes, because I didn't want any trouble here. So he taps you on the shoulder, and you just step off the platform, and you break the water. And I went straight down to the bottom, and I was sitting there cross-legged, like sitting bull on the bottom of this pool. And I remember clear as day, the first thought in my mind is, I got to get the hell out of here. So I began flapping and kicking and flapping and kicking and flapping and kicking. And I broke the water, sucked in some air, and then I started slapping and kicking, slapping and kicking and slapping and kicking. And I could hear them yelling, get that man out of the water, get that man out of the water. That guy can't swim, get that man out of the water. But they didn't have to come for me because I was so lopsided and uncoordinated. I was actually making a right turn until my head hit the edge of the pool. And they yanked me out of the water, and they said, what's the matter with you? Can you swim or not? I said, no. And he said, get in that room over there. And they sent me on the other side of the pool to this room. And quite a few guys were standing in that room. Now, either they came clean or they did the same thing I did. I don't know what they did, but I wasn't going to confess. So what they did was, after the swim test, they said, all right, we understand what's wrong with you guys. We see it all the time. It's not that you can't swim, it's that you're afraid of the deep water. And that was the key. It's an aquaphobia. If you can't touch the bottom, you panic. And so here's what we need. You need to understand the life-saving skills. So if you can get across this pool, not the length, but across this pool and back again, we will pass you. Okay. So I looked and I said, I can probably leap at least 10 feet across this pool and then kick my way to the other side. And so, in knowing that we were in 4 feet or less than 5 feet of water, that was not a big stress. So we actually, most of us, I think all of us passed that test, but that's what we did. We swam the length of the pool. We demonstrated that we could do that. It's just that we were just messed up in the head when it came to deep water. And that's how I passed the test. But I remember sitting cross-legged at the bottom of that pool and realizing I got to get the hell out of here, and just vaulting to the top there. That's how I got through boot camp.
Great story. And I love this picture too. Where are you here?
This is Monte Carlo, Monaco.
Oh boy.
I'm on the grounds of the palace at Monaco, and down below there is Monte Carlo with all the casinos and the yachts and everything there. This was July 3rd, 1976. It was the day before, of course, 4th of July, the bicentennial. Next day, we marched in a parade, and that was one of the nicest port calls of my time over the Mediterranean.
And here's a certificate, I think, for the 200th birthday of the U.S. Navy.
Exactly. This certificate is 49 years old. It's one of my prized possessions. And I don't know, you can't read it here, but can I read it to you?
Absolutely.
All right, United States Navy 200th birthday, building on a proud tradition, 1775 to 1975. To all who shall see these presents, know ye that on the occasion of the United States Navy's 200th year of service, commemorating the date in 1775 that the Continental Congress first ordered outfitting of a naval vessel, that CTO-3 Christopher Parolo was on active duty and serving in support and defense of his country against all enemies at a significant moment in our nation's history, with Commander, United States Sixth Fleet Staff. Certified by my hands this 13th day of October in the history of our Lord, 1975. J.L. Holloway, Admiral, U.S. Navy, Chief of Naval Operations, and F.C. Turner, Vice Admiral, U.S. Navy, Commander, Sixth Fleet. So
I see.
everybody got one of these certificates. It was a command thing. I'm pretty sure everybody in the Navy got something like that.
Chris, I see here your rate and rank, CT-03. What is that?
CTO is in the Oscar. At the
CTO. Okay.
Right. Cryptologic Technician Operator, 3rd class.
Ooh, so cryptologic technician.
This is part of the Naval Security Group. I always tell everybody what they say, what'd you do on active duty? I said, we ran around the Mediterranean chasing Russians.
And that's what you did. I mean, truly tracking Russian submarines, Russian ships, both.
Our division, our F4 division on board the flagship there, that was the key thing, is supplying the admiral with special intelligence and intercepting and all that kind of stuff there. Yeah.
So you weren't really part of a crew, of a ship crew. You were kind of an adjunct, correct?
I guess you could, yeah, an adjunct, or you could say we were staff of Sixth Fleet staff embarked aboard.
Aboard.
Right,
so
yeah.
you were on the ship, but kind of not of it.
Yes. You had 900 crew members who ran the ship, all the stuff, and then you'd have us running all the fleet operations for the admiral. So this was like our workplace, as opposed to, well, we lived there too. I shouldn't say that, but we lived on the ship there. But we were not. You're right. We were not crew in the normal sense of the word.
What is this thing behind you?
That's a coffin rack. That's a bed.
That's a coffin rack. I don't like the sound of that.
I know, but they call it that because instead of the hammocks or the suspended mattresses that you see in some of the older pictures here, the Navy came up with this 3-tiered bed, which we called a rack. And what was cool about it was, I don't know if that's 10 inches or what that is there, but all your possessions went into 3 compartments in here, and your mattress and blanket was up top there. So, it was a lid. It was just like opening a coffin. And then you had a small drawer in the center that you could lock with a padlock, but you could unlock that and pull it out for shaving gear or small stuff here without opening up the lid there. So you had access to all your gear, and everything was in there, except the bulky uniforms or the bulky pea coats. They went into lockers that you were assigned in the berthing space. That bag that you see hanging on the bar there, that's called a ditty bag, and that's where you threw your dirty laundry. So you filled that bag with your dirty laundry, and then they would come around and pick it up, and they would take it to the laundry. They would wash these things here and put them back in there. The bag had your name on it, but everything you owned was stenciled with your name too, so they couldn't lose it. And then I see my ball cap hanging there, and I can even see my combination locker hanging there too. But that was where I slept. There was a 3rd tier right in the very corner of our compartment, which was under the helo deck. So we had quite a few people in there, at least 170 to 200 guys in this particular place. It was a big space.
That mattress doesn't look too thick.
No, it wasn't, but I can't remember. I can't remember it being bad or uncomfortable there. But a sheet, that's the blanket up there and the mattress, and that's it.
Chad Riddle, I see you nodding your head and smiling to everything that Chris is saying.
I remember that. I was never fortunate to be in the cruise berth being an officer, but I remember seeing all that, and I remember the ditty bag. I've used that with you from time to time. But I just wanted to comment. One of the comments put in by Ray Brendel tonight said, "If you can't swim, they sent you to the Coast Guard." I hope Dale doesn't hear about that.
No, Dale, don't. Absolutely, Dale or Ida May.
Yeah. But the
Yeah.
other thing is, when we were in OCS up in Newport, it was funny that we had one guy, Calvin Lum. He came from Southern Cal. He was about 5'3", and he weighed about 90 pounds dripping wet. And he got up on the high dive. You had to dive off 3 times. You had to jump off 3 times to pass. The first time he went off, we're all standing around looking. There were 2 big guys swimming around there, just as sort of the lifeguard. He sank to the bottom, literally like a rock. And that Friday night at the unit meeting, somebody came out with a big painted rock. He got the rock award, and he had to keep that till the next class came in. When there's always somebody who was like that. I don't know if Chris had anything like a rock award.
I don't remember that. I don't remember that.
It was fun. Everybody laughed like crazy. And that's the only reason I remember Calvin Lum.
Hey, I put in the Zoom here, we have a very simple best and worst of the Navy poll. And I think I wanted you to rank what's the best and what's the worst of the Navy. Best of the Navy: eat good food, learn useful skill, sleep in clean bunker rack, travel the world, or other. Worst of the Navy: hidebound traditions, seasickness, that would be me, claustrophobic conditions, bad station locations, other. And then I'm asking Navy vets, if you had to join another branch of service, what would you join? The Army, the Air Force, the Coast Guard, or the Marine Corps? And I'll be wrapping up the poll, and we'll be talking about the results. Bob Von Bargen, does it make you happy that you were Air Force?
Well, my career was Air Force, but and I changed the Air Force in ROTC in college. But I started off in the Coast Guard Reserve, and I mentioned that once to a naval officer, an academy graduate, and he looked at me and he paused and he said, "Well," he says, "yeah, that's about right." He said, "At 6'4", you make it. You can walk the shore."
Yes, Chris.
Todd, one last story here, because I know you want to move on there, but one last story here. I got to tell you about the day I left. First of all, my father wasn't happy with my decision, quitting college and pretty much making it clear that I just was fed up with Pittsburgh and the business and that. So, but I had to wait a few months before I left after he found out what I was going to do. I was 21, so he was not involved. He didn't have to sign any papers. So it was kind of a frosty summer. And on the morning I had to go, it was a rainy, dreary, drizzly morning. It was dark when we left the house, and he drove me to the recruiting station, which is right here in Penn Hills, right in the Penn Hills Shopping Center. And so we parked not too far from the recruiter's van, and I don't very much remember our conversation, but we got out of the car there and gave me a little bit of advice, a few words, whatever, and we shook hands and I walked away. And I got in the van, and I was in the second seat behind the driver there, and in the middle seat of the bench seat of this big Chevy van, whatever it was back then. And I was, some of the guys were having some banter, and we were just pretty quiet and waiting for the recruiter to come in and start driving us away. And all of a sudden, he appears at the window on my left, and he's wiping the rain away from the window, and he's looking for me, and he spots me, and he just gives me a wave. And I kind of sheepishly waved back, and he walked away. And I was kind of like a little bit embarrassed here, but the guy next to me said, wow, that guy scared the crap out of me. Who was that? And I said, it was my father. He said, yeah, he had tears in his eyes.
Oh,
And from the back of the van, a young man said, one of the guys said from the back of the van, he says, man, my father could give a crap about me.
yeah.
And it kind of like gave me a little bit of something to think about on the way to the airport.
And think about for the rest of your life.
Yeah, no, I never forgot that. It was years later that I thought to myself, it wasn't just that I was leaving the family and leaving the business or whatever. I think he was genuinely afraid for me. I wasn't afraid of anything, but he was afraid for me because he had lived in Italy. He had seen war, and he was a young boy, but he'd seen war on the Gustav line. They were 20 miles west of Casino.
Yeah.
And he'd seen war, and all through the Vietnam thing, he would always pay attention to the news and what was happening. And he knew a young man from the neighborhood who got killed. And a neighbor two doors down from his small corner store back then in the 70s, I remember he got wounded. He was a Marine. He got wounded. And out of the clear blue sky, my father took a day off and drove to Philadelphia, to the Philadelphia Naval Hospital to visit him. And when he came back, he really never told me what he saw there.
Yeah.
And I realized that, you know what? I think he was afraid for me. He had no idea what I was getting into or where the heck I was going to end up, even though the war in Vietnam was winding down. And it didn't occur to me till years later that was part of his animosity. But that was that morning here, and that evening we marched through the tunnel and into Recruit Training Center, from the main side into Recruit Training Center, and that was it. You were either going to come out a sailor or a failure.
Yeah.
That was your options.
Right. And your father knew, even if you weren't heading into harm's way, that he was losing his young son. I mean, you were going to come back an adult, a man, and your relationship would change, and that's always a poignant time in a parent's life, I think.
Now him and my mother did come to my graduation at Great Lakes, and took us to dinner. Took me and my other friend to dinner in downtown Chicago. But he also spoiled my chance to run up to Milwaukee and get stinking drunk. So
good for him. Good for him.
That was it.
Thank you so much, Chris. Well, congratulations on their 50th anniversary. That is quite something to reflect upon. What a transformation in your life. Oh, there we go.
I still have that cap. I still have that cap. This is the original.
It's called a cover, Chris.
I'm sorry. I still have that cover. It's called a combination cover.
I love it.
This is a utility hat.
That's the utility.
Before ball caps, or
Yeah.
at the time I was in, before ball caps were the rage, this is what they would issue you. It's called a utility hat. And you would put your, if you were a petty officer, you put your crow, you'd stick it right there in the middle there. And I still have, this thing still fits remarkably, but that's a utility.
I love it. Oh,
Anyway.
what a wonderful thing for you to share with us tonight, Chris, this anniversary. And I do think it's a significant thing. It's like a birthday in many respects. Thank you very much. Ed Cottrell, I see that you're with us, and I'm so grateful that you've joined us again. For those who know Ed, of course, he's our World War II veteran, P-47 pilot. He flew 65 missions in World War II. He's 102 years old, and he lives right near Asheville, North Carolina, which just got devastated with Hurricane Helene. How are you, Ed?
I'm fine. I'm happy I'm in Hendersonville rather than Asheville, because it is a disaster, a real disaster.
So you're about 25 miles maybe south of Asheville?
Yeah, I'm about 25 minutes from Asheville south, and the outskirts of Asheville you're able to get around and you can see all the damage, but inside Asheville, it is devastation. And thank the Lord the military's there, because other than that, there would be chaos right now if they weren't.
So it is, National Guard is there in full force.
They've got 1,000 troops in there.
Oh boy.
Protecting the city. And thank the Lord. because
Oh,
those people have no place to go. Some of them still don't have electricity or even thoughts of electricity. They're drinking water, whatever they can get, and they're sleeping wherever they can sleep. It's
oh,
it's
boy.
it's sad.
Oh, that's awful. And you and Susan, your daughter, are okay in
We're
Hendersonville.
we're fine. I only lost electricity for 2 days. I never had food problems or water problems. And living in a retirement community, they took good care of us because they had their own generator and they could feed everybody. And so that's how we survived.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Ed. It's good to have you back. We were
My
concerned about
pleasure.
you.
I'm happy to listen to all this Navy stuff because I'm as much as I would like the Navy and their uniforms, I'm not that familiar with the Navy.
Ed, I've been trying to understand the Navy for years, and I'm just barely scratching the surface. We have another Navy veteran with us, Renee Gefkin. Renee, thank you for joining us. You could unmute yourself if you'd like. You sent me an interesting email, and I urged you if you could join us to share a little bit of your story.
I apologize for my voice. I've had brain cancer, but I joined in June of 1974. I wanted to be an airline stewardess because my dad was stationed in Hawaii, so we flew back and forth. We lived in Hawaii for 4 years. I'm a military brat. But at that time, you had to be 21 because of the alcohol. So I decided to join the service, and I decided to join the Navy because to give back. So my civics teacher said the best job in the future was computers and medicine. And in June 1974, I didn't know what a computer was. Now I'm looking at one. So I went into medicine. So my father had just retired from 32nd Street in San Diego. And he took me down to talk to a female naval person to be sure I was making the right decision. So she told me a lot. And then I said, why did you join the Navy versus the other services? And she said, because we have the best uniforms. And it's true. Every time I wore my dark blues or my summer light blues and traveling through the airports, people come up to me thinking I'm an airline stewardess. But my work as in the hospital, I wore white pantsuits like the nurses wore. So I went to Orlando for boot camp. And there's a big difference between men and women in the military. Men, when they go join the service, they don't have to carry anything with them. With women, we had to have a suitcase with bras, underwear, girdles. We had to wear girdles, which I didn't know how to do it. My mom had to show me. We had a suitcase full of stuff. And a bathing suit.
Renee,
did bathing suit.
One sailor who served right around you when you did and did camp in Orlando, she told me that they had to wear lipstick.
Yes, we did. And when we had our in boot camp, when we're standing there for hours, we'd get nervous and we lost a bunch of inspections because we chewed our lipstick off. So every time we knew it, we always would say to each other, don't lick your lips. Don't lick your lips. Yeah, we had to bring that too. So on the swimming test, we all wore our own bathing suits. we just swam from one end to the other. And there were a lot of guys who didn't know how to swim, but I knew how to swim, living in Hawaii for 4 years. And it was a hot day because this was in August of Orlando. And I'm floating on my back and I'm going inch at a time. And I'm halfway through the pool because I didn't want to get out. And a guy they had hooks, like the kind you took the old vaudevilles off the stage.
Yes.
They had hooked. And they go, okay, recruit, we know you can swim. Hustle it or we're going to hook you out, So, but so as I was, so then I went to court school in Great Lakes. And then I went to the submarine base in Groton, Connecticut. And I worked in the emergency room there. And then the Navy is very generous. They send you to A school, but they also send you to C school. So you get 2 training. So I wasn't a big fan of patient care anymore after working in the ER and medical wards for a year. So I went to the psych program. And at that time, all the services would have their own schooling. But my school was the first one where we went to Fort Sam Houston because the military was trying to combine them and save money. So my school was the first one, Fort Sam Houston, Texas, which is like a country club of a base. Because most bases are dumps, especially Army bases. Air Forces, you said, which one would you ever join again? I'd go Air Force. Because they always have theaters, they have the big commissary, PXs, golf courses, bowling alleys. So I went to psych tech school, and there was about 20 Navy folks, and the rest were Army, and about 30, 40 of us. And as I wrote to you, we kind of variated our uniform a little bit. We'd wear barrettes in our hair as girls. And I wore green socks one time, and the Army guy who was in charge of us going, I don't think that's a proper uniform. And, we'd all say, oh, no, this is fine in the Navy. They're pretty lax. So I had green socks on, and the guy goes, I know you can't wear the green socks. And I go, oh, it's my homage to the Army, But we learned a lot in psych tech school. And then I went to Oakland Naval Hospital, and I did the practical one. And then I had orders for Okinawa. I put in for Japan, but I got Okinawa. And at that time, Okinawa was kind of the Riviera of Japan because the weather was beautiful. And I was the first female naval enlisted person on the island when I arrived there. And it was still an Army base. And the Army base, there was nothing on it except for a school, military housing, a furniture store, and the Naval Hospital. That base was nothing to speak of. So everybody was excited to see me because a lot of people had their their duty extended for like 6 months more, 7 months, and they couldn't go home. So when they saw me, they're like, oh, wow, Navy finally arrived, a naval female, so we're going to go home soon. And so they treated me really nice. I felt like a celebrity, like I was Elizabeth Taylor at the time, I guess. And 2 days later, we got a typhoon, and all the single people had to go and be at the hospital. And they're all blaming me for bringing the typhoon. So I went from being this high to, oh, I'm a jinx or something. So in January, the hospital became the Naval Hospital, Okinawa. And I received a thing, a plank, piece of paper that said I'm honorary plank. And I also received the 200-year thing. So, and then I got out of the service that fall. I think it was September of 1978. And 2 days before I left Okinawa, they switched the roads over to Japanese style, where we drive on the right. They changed it, everybody drove on the left. But I had already left, thank God.
So, Renee, first of all, your voice is wonderful, and we could all hear.
No, it's not. I sound like a witch.
Oh, we heard you perfectly. That was no problem at all. And how wonderful that you wanted to be what we call today a flight attendant. What was called stewardesses then.
Yes.
Having the stewardesses were modeled on the military or modeled on the Navy.
Yes.
And because you weren't 21 and couldn't serve alcohol, you couldn't be a stewardess. So you joined the Navy. And I imagine that it was looking back, you're glad you did it.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Well, as Chris said, we just wanted to get out of Dodge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though I was a psych tech, I came from a very dysfunctional family,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't take it just to understand them, but it did help. But having a military background, because then I worked in medicine for 40 years. I did administrative jobs, where I was a medical transcriptionist at Balboa Hospital for 5 years. And we had 200 doctors dictating. Except the only thing weird was, if anyone's familiar with Balboa Naval Hospital, all the flights to San Diego Airport, they flew right over the hospital. You drive to work, and it looks like a DC jumbo jet can barely clear the antennas of the hospital. The doctors are still dictating while there's a jet going over.
Yeah.
So you transcribe and you got like 2 lines that they're dictating. You can't hear a word. But all that background helped me throughout my life. And I got the GI paid for my college, for my AS degree in medical secretary science, and my BS in business administration, hospital administration. And I wound up being a case manager at here in Porterville, California, where we have a state hospital for developmental intellectual disability clients. And I think we're the only ones with forensic clients. These are intellectual disability, mental retarded clients who commit some kind of crime.
Right.
And I worked with them for a couple of years till I retired. So, and my daughters always said, Mom, you're the only person who can really talk straight to people. And you kind of scare people. In fact, you scare my ex-husband and his family. They go, I always thought I was a nice person. She goes, no, I think it's because he was in the military.
That's it.
It comes across somehow.
Yeah.
And I'm sure some of the people can relate, but I never really thought it like that.
Yep.
But it's like people know you mean business, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. I'm 19 years old. I'm working in the emergency room. You do such things at such a young age. Where the other guy, Chris, he did crypto. My roommate in Connecticut repaired the crypto machines. She went all over the world. She was one of the few people who actually repaired them. In fact, she probably knew Chris. I can't remember her name. But it's funny. A small world.
And Renee, I think you're exactly right. I think there's something about the military with the direct communication, giving the information directly. That is something that doesn't exist in the civilian world, or doesn't exist as much. And I think that's often, I hear that often from veterans who are transitioning into civilian life, that their coworkers complain, like, what's this guy's problem? He's just, because they don't couch things in niceties. Renee, thank you
There's
so
only
much.
one
Yeah.
thing I hated the most about the military, and that was no fraternization. I understand it. I do understand it. I'm not talking sexual. I'm talking about the nurses that I worked with. They're only a couple of years older than me. When I got out of the service, I worked at a Catholic hospital in Virginia, because I met my husband in Okinawa, and we've been married 46 years. And when I worked on the cancer terminal care ward, and the nurses were only 24 or so, of the RNs. And I kept calling them ma'am, ma'am, ma'am. They go, do not call me ma'am. And I turned out they were good friends. And I miss that I could never be a friend with an officer.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, I understand the reason, but I feel like I missed out on some good friendships.
Yeah. And we would put that in the con mark here in the poll. Hey, I want to thank you very much, Renee.
Thank you.
I want to go to Rich Pescatore. Is it Pescatore or Pescatore?
Torrey.
Pescatore from Beverly, Mass.
Right.
And Rich is an expert on the origins of the Navy, which actually predate October 13th, 1775,
Right.
predate the order of the Second Continental Congress to create a Navy. And you would argue that the Navy, the American Navy, is born where you live, in Beverly, or maybe next door in Marblehead.
No, if I don't want to be tarred and feathered, I have to say Beverly is the is the birthplace. It's an ongoing battle, and okay, yeah. Well, let me. It's the birthplace. Now, do I control this, or do you control?
No, I do, Rich. And what I did is I took
okay.
you sent me a wonderful account of the debate about the origin or the birthplace of the Navy. And what I did is I took some images out of the presentation that you sent me. So here we have the sign of Marblehead that says birthplace of the American Navy. Here you have a sign in Beverly, welcome to Beverly, birthplace of the American Navy. And then you have another place like this. Whitehall, New York claims to be the birthplace of the U.S. Navy. So there are a lot of birthplaces.
Okay. Well, let me do it virtually. It's an ongoing debate. What happened was George Washington appointed Beverly as the base to start the Navy. What was happening was Boston was under siege, and he comes to Cambridge, and looking from the hillsides, he looks across and he sees that even though they had done a great job pinning the British down and keeping them in Boston, they were being supplied by these ships from outside of Boston, and he needed somehow to stop that. If not, he realized that just by attrition, they would lose the war, because as long as they were being supplied, it would just keep going. And the other thing was Washington needed gunpowder and supplies, muskets, and whatever. So what he does is he appoints Colonel Glover to lease a schooner, and the schooner becomes the first naval ship. And what they do is they go outside, and they're going up to Gloucester, and they see the Lively, which was the ship that brought General Gage in, and they immediately chased them into Cape Ann Bay, and they didn't follow them. So the next day they're coming down, and they see the brig, the Unity, and they able to capture the Unity. And when they get on the ship, to their dismays, they found that the Beverly had captured it the day before. And it was really an American ship. And this really bummed the crew out, because the incentive of being a privateer, running the ship, you'd get 1/3 of the booty that was on the ship. And so what happens is, now you got to remember, this is only 3 days, and all of a sudden they capture a ship, the reward, because it was a friendly ship. They refuse to sail, and they're staying in Gloucester. And Washington, who's down in Cambridge, he's livid. He just can't believe that they won't move. So he sends 200 military soldiers from Salem, Beverly, and Manchester, and they march them all the way back down to Cambridge, and they have a court martial. And what they do is they drum them all out, and they flog the top 3 guys. And I mean, when you really think about it, Hollywood couldn't have written a better script. Here you have 3 days of a brand new Navy, and you got a mutiny. So now Glover comes back, and he is trying to get a new crew. They go out again, and now the Nautilus, which is a British ship, catches them, and they have orders to burn the Hannah. So the Hannah, which is outmanned and outgunned, the Nautilus had a crew of 139 sailors. They had 16 guns. The Hannah had 39 guys, 4 swivel guns, and they were outgunned, outmanned. So what they do is they make a beeline for Beverly Harbor. Now, Beverly Harbor, the reason they picked it, it is a very difficult harbor in relationship.
Yeah, here we go. This is a.
Well, I had a slide that actually showed it. No, you don't have it? Okay. Well, I had one that was superimposed on the harbor of Marblehead, and it shows you how difficult it is to maneuver through Beverly Harbor versus Marblehead Harbor. So anyway.
And I'm sorry. My slide show is advancing without my. But I just wanted to show people this is a model.
Slideshow?
No, that's okay. This is a model of the Hannah, which is the first schooner that was commissioned for war by the Continental Army. So this is, in essence, the first ship of the Navy, the schooner.
And this ship is that model is one of the biggest models in the country. It's in the TD Bank on Cabot Street. So anyway, he goes into Beverly Harbor, and Captain Collins, who's in the Nautilus, he is just enraged and furious about this whole situation. So he follows the Hannah into Beverly Harbor, and what happens is he runs aground, and the Hannah purposely grounds itself because it can't outrun the Nautilus. They take the cannons off the Hannah and put it on the beach. And now the Nautilus comes in, and they can't move. And then all of a sudden, 200 military militiamen show up on both sides of Salem Harbor and Beverly, and they start shooting at the Nautilus, and he's helpless. Now, what happens is and the cannons are actually pointing up to the sky, so he's totally helpless. And the militia on both sides are peppering the Nautilus, and both ships took some incredible damage. And once the tide came, the Nautilus was able to go back. And that was the end of that. But then as we go forward, the everyone is claiming there's about 8 to 9 cities that claim to be the birthplace of the Navy. And you'll find that they have a really sound argument on why they should be the birthplace of the Navy. However, as far as the Navy's concerned, they do not recognize any town or city as being the birthplace of the Navy. And they put it all around the date of the birthday. And they basically, because so many communities have come forward to claim that they are the birthplace of the Navy, that the Navy basically said, well, this is the date that we have established as the birthplace of the Navy. You have to have documentation to show that you are close to that date. So right now, nobody is considered the birthplace of the Navy. So now you say, why are they fighting and everyone is battling for the crown to be the birthplace of the Navy? Well, it's very simple. There's a thing called tourism travel. And what it is, it's all about in this particular case, battle sites. So whoever, history being first is the most important component. And if you number one, you are going to draw the tourists to your location. And a good example of that was in the 60s, Senator Jarvis from New York files legislation to say that we are indeed the birthplace of the Navy. And he does that based on the skirmish on Lake Champlain with Benedict Arnold. And so he has that going. And then the state legislature blesses it and said, absolutely, you are the birthplace of the Navy. But the Navy.
So according to the great state of New York, Whitehall, New York is the birthplace of the Navy. But according to Philadelphia, Philadelphia is the birthplace. According to Rich Pescatore, Beverly is the birthplace.
Well,
the debate goes on.
I'll tell you a quick story about a while back. This senator from Massachusetts, his name was Senator Rush, and it's a small world. He files a legislation to say that Beverly is indeed the birthplace of the Navy. And Marblehead says, oh, no, you don't. We are the birthplace. Well, the ironic part about it was who graduated from the Naval Academy, and he's from Pittsburgh. And Rush, and he had the command down at the naval station down in Newport, and Senator Rush was his chief of staff. But they couldn't put it through either. So it's just ongoing. Now, here's the other thing about the money of historical societies. And that is big business. It's in the billions. There are more historical societies in America than museums. And they generate an incredible amount of money, and they keep it going. Now, the thing about it is, when I first got involved with this, if you recall, about, I don't know, a year ago, when the Secretary of the Navy was on, and I was whimpering about the fact that they're going to celebrate the 250th down in Philadelphia instead of Marblehead. And it's just the way it is. And
I'm gonna, if you don't mind, Rich, I'm just gonna amplify for everybody that this is a story people are going to want to learn more about and read about.
Right.
I had not known about it. People between the Nautilus on the left with HMS Nautilus, which was a warship, a British, October 10th, 1775. So 3 days before the actual birthplace of the Navy. The Hannah on the right, the small ship, it was just a fishing schooner that had been converted into a warship. The Nautilus chases the schooner into Beverly Harbor. Beverly, or the Hannah, deliberately grounds itself into the harbor, takes the guns off the ship, turns them around, the good people of Beverly, they gather, they all start firing on the Nautilus, which also grounds in low tide.
Yeah.
And it's really quite an amazing story and kind of a preview of coming attractions in this. And it's kind of a naval guerrilla war.
Was.
And
but there was another piece to this puzzle on who is the king or the birthplace of the Navy. Washington, in his wisdom, recognized that George Cabot, he was the second richest person in Massachusetts, and he and his brother owned 40 privateers. Now, the privateer is basically a contractor where they contract them out and they get 1/3 of whatever they capture, whether it's and that played, because the thing, when you drill down and you look at the history, there were over 90,000 privateers, and in the Continental Army there were 90,000 people, and the privateers actually augmented the Continental Navy because they didn't have the money to do it, and the privateers were a big factor. And history has been unkind to Beverly because they don't point this out. And also the privateers were a training ground for future officers of the Continental Navy. And they played such an incredible part for that. Now, in 1975, allegedly, Marblehead and Beverly shook hands, and they said the feud is over. We'll share the crown. Well, let me tell you, last year we have a homecoming and we have a bicycle race, and they had a big sign. And this was last summer. And at the bottom of the sign, it says Beverly, birthplace of the Navy. So it goes on and on and on.
The feud will not stop.
Yeah.
What a fascinating and wonderful story. Thank you so much, Rich, for sharing just a little bit of this history with us.
Can I just say one thing? We are exploring the possibility of a reenactment of the battle in Beverly Harbor.
Oh, wouldn't that be cool?
We have two schooners that are lined up, and we got a couple of regiments of the Minutemen. So they'll be on one side and Salem, and they'll be on the other Beverly side. You're all familiar with Rev 250. In most cities, including Philadelphia, they're all participating in this. And the whole thing is these incredible reenactments that are going to happen in 2025. And
that sounds like a great road trip opportunity for the Veterans Breakfast.
Well, there may be. I have one or two people that say they're going to be doing a tour. So if they do it,
please do. Thank you, Rich. I appreciate it. Chris, were you going to ask something or say something?
No, this reminds me of the age-old. This reminds me of another issue here. Christ was not born on December 25th. The Vatican says so, and that's what we're going with. And the same thing with the birthday of the Navy. Somebody said so, and that's what the world is going with.
That's what we're going with. Exactly.
That's what we're going with.
Todd, go ahead, Chris.
Todd, have you ever heard of
Liberty Cuffs?
Liberty Cuffs.
No.
CUFS. Okay. This is sort of before World War I. The sailors, they would go to the Far East. They would go to Japan and the Philippines, etc. And the embroidering was so beautiful that, and this is an example of renegade sailors. They would have these patches embroidered, and then they would sew them inside their jumpers, inside their dress uniform, in the sleeve. So it was illegal. It was not official. You could get reprimanded for having such things because you were out of uniform. But when you went ashore on liberty or on leave and you went into a bar, you unbuttoned your cuff and you rolled it back. And here was this beautiful dragon or mermaid or schooner embroidered on your uniform. There you go. There you go. There he is. And you would attract attention. You would attract the girls. You would attract you were a tough sailor there because you were in Westpac, or you dared to wear that under uniform in front of in front of your chief or officers, and they didn't even know you had them. But they were called Liberty cuffs because you only revealed them when you were out of sight of the brass.
So this tradition did continue, you're saying, after.
I remember seeing a guy in what's it Logan Airport in Chicago once. I was passing through there, and there he was just sitting there in the chair waiting for his flight, and he had them all rolled up. They were the most beautiful embroidered dragons I'd ever seen. And so yeah, there you go.
Oh, that is so great. Keeper?
He's a
Got it. Thank you, Chris. Man, do I learn a ton. Bob Flage, I am going to ask you to hold also of Eric Grabowsky. I do want to make sure we get to them. Walt, they very kindly agreed to join us tonight. Walt, thank you very much for joining us. I think this is your first time joining us here, Walt Brinker.
Yes, it is.
Let's stop talking about the Navy, huh, Walt? Let's get some Army into this conversation.
That's okay with me.
Yeah, okay with you. You are a West Point graduate class of the famous class of 1966. You did 2 tours in Vietnam. You've done a lot of other things. You have a fascinating story. In fact, I want to get you back on sometime to share your story. But you wrote to the wrong way bullets on the bandolier in the 3 servicemen statue in Washington, D.C.
Actually, I think the issue was with those 3 men. That's a shot of me there just after I'd given up command of my company on my second tour, and we captured that machine gun a couple of days beforehand.
Okay.
Go back to the slide there you go. Notice how the guy on the left there, the machine gunner, is wearing his belts of ammo like Pancho Villa style.
Mm-hmm.
Out of the box. The ammunition is issued which is all protected from mud and water and other things that could cause those rounds to jam in the machine gun. And so I found very early that you're much better off if you have your machine gunner keep his ammo in a box. No, it's even smaller than that. I think it's about 4 or 5 boxes worth of ammo, maybe 6 in one of those metal cans. You carry the metal cans also, but if as soon as you're shot at, typically you flop on the ground. Well, if you flop on the ground with all the mud and crud that we had in Vietnam, that ammo that you're carrying Pancho Villa style is going to get funky very quickly, and is going to cause that machine gun to jam. And that's the last thing you want to do, is to have the machine gun jam. So I made my guys, it wasn't my idea, but I made all my guys, all my machine gunners and the assistant machine gunners carry their ammo where it would not get wet. And so the machine gunner himself, he might have a string of about 20 rounds that were linked hanging out of his gun so he could initiate fire. But very quickly, his assistant machine gunner would attach other belts of ammo to the 20 rounds that the machine gunner carried, and so you could put out more rounds then. But you never want to carry that machine gun ammo like that statue has. That's crazy.
So this is coming from a platoon leader, Walt Brinker, and a company commander, Walt Brinker, served 2 tours in Vietnam. You would never have your men carry bandoliers, your M60 bullets or ammo and bandolier style, because it's going to get dirty and it's going to foul up the gun, right?
Exactly. And whenever I see pictures of people walking around in Vietnam with ammo like that, I just think those guys are really stupid. I mean, they really are stupid. That just doesn't work.
There's an example of the direct kind of speech we're talking about, Renee, that military people have. Yeah, well, then why do they issue bandoliers?
Well, the bandolier
is just a belt.
Well, the issue linked ammo up to about 100 rounds in a link. That I mean, in a belt, and you put that link. It's all folded up in a small box that attaches to the side of the machine gun. But the machine gunner himself may or may not carry all that 100 rounds. The machine gun's heavy, so you want to distribute the weight of the ammo evenly among more than one guy.
Okay, so I'm going to ask which dummies on this Zoom call carried their ammo like this, bandolier style. Will anybody fess up to it? No, Doug Dorr said no way.
We carried bandoliers, but we carried the rounds were opposite. And like I said, I've never seen a box in the field.
Oh yeah.
Oh really? You didn't have boxes in the field?
No. One thing we're afraid if they got discarded, Charlie would make a nice bomb out of the thing.
Oh boy.
Because you never carried an empty one back.
Doug Dorr never had ammo bandolier.
No, we never carried it like that. I remember we tried at the basic school where you learn to be a Marine officer. We tried it because we wanted to look cool. And we had our asses reamed out by the Vietnam veterans when they caught us doing that. And I did my infantry tour in 6 Marines. I never saw a professional infantryman, M60 machine gunner, ever carry it like that in the statute. Never. For those same reasons stated. It would get dirty, it would jam up, and in a firefight, you depend on that M60 gunner to lay down suppressive fires.
And Walt, I have to say, though, that this looks a lot cooler than this.
Well, it might look cool, but it's stupid.
I got one comment. This is Glenn. We're going to have to go back to all those World War II movies and edit them. There must be a million scenes of people carrying these bandoliers around for machine guns in World War II, right?
Well, maybe John Wayne did it, but I don't think real soldiers would never have done that. I don't think.
I'm going to ask Walt if he could come back, because he has quite a story. Silver Star recipient, Purple Heart. Again, these 2 tours. And not only that, Walt, but you also are an author, and you do wonderful work today that we've kind of helped to promote. There's a picture of you, and that is your roadside survival book, which I know it doesn't sound like it's veteran related, but I think it's very much in line with the ethic that I hear from so many veterans of just a sense of, service to others. And this is something that you've taken on in the past several years. So I was going to have you come on again to talk a little bit more about your Vietnam experience. Walt, would you be open to doing that?
Sure. Just give me a date and we'll do it.
Got it. All right. Thank you. Let's go to Justin and then Eric Grabowsky. Justin.
Well, I just want to go back to Walt. I flew with 25th Division my first tour, and I flew with the VNAP the second tour, but I never saw anybody carrying ammo like that from the Wolfhouse or whatever. But I know that on several occasions, the guys on the ground were so pleased when they requested additional M60 ammo. I didn't bring them the 200 round can. I bought the 5,000 round can, which is the one we carried in the helicopter.
That sounds like a heavy can.
Well, one very young, I don't know, I said maybe 19-year-old, he was so tickled. He said, I haven't seen that much ammunition in one place in my entire life. But it's all we could get quickly for them. So, but no, I never saw the bandoliers ever. And I commented on that when we installed that statue in Washington the first time.
Well, I know for a fact that Mark Spirdigliosi, who I will see tomorrow at Fort Indiantown Gap, he pulled grenade pins out with his teeth and threw them, and he had bandoliers all over the place. Mark, that was you.
That was me, and that's why I have dentures today, Todd.
Let's check your teeth and see if you have any teeth left.
That's right.
Never. That's the same principle. Never happened.
Yeah. Bob asked, what part of the first cav were you in, Walt? I was in 2-5.
I was in the 2nd and the 7th Cav. I had C Company.
Okay. Okay. Eric, you have so patient. You have been listening to our banter all night. I'm very grateful for you joining us. You and your father have done this, really single-handedly done this wonderful research on this gun. Little David.
Little David. And I'm happy to be at the end because there's just wonderful stories here. My father's not able to make it tonight. He'll watch the tape. I do want to mention that I'm not a veteran. My father is. Two things, though, based on the front end of the meeting. I am broadcasting tonight from North Dakota, the future home of the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library in Medora, North Dakota, that's coming down the pike. But my father was on the USS John Paul Jones in the 1960s. He was a radarman. So he is a veteran. And I want to thank Mayor Jim Nowak of Whitehall, who initially built a bridge between Todd, my father, and myself, my father, Ralph Edward Grabowsky Jr. After our visit last year to Fort Greg Adams. And I'll just refer folks to Todd's article from August or thereabouts, 2023, Meet Little David. It's on the veteransbreakfastclub.org website. That has the overview of the gun with references linked to get more information. So the purpose, I've been asked to come here tonight to give an update on the direction of the research. And so there's a sort of range of areas. I want to thank two people in particular, and I'm going to share this tape with them when it's available, Stefan Rohal and Weldon Svoboda, the U.S. Army. They were really involved in allowing us, my father and I, to go to the Fort Greg Adams, formerly Fort Lee in Virginia, to go and see, and there's a picture of my father at the Little David site. It's in a canopy, and I'll get into a little bit how we even got to that point. I want to focus on future direction here because that's really what Todd's interested in. There's a sort of number of directions I want to go. I'll mention one, and it's just a bridge from what Todd mentioned earlier. Was there only one Little David? Probably. But when we were at Fort Greg Adams in the archives there, and again, thanks to the Weldon for giving us access and ongoing suggestions, I had seen a document there, a DA Form 2609, probably put together by a George Burling Jarrett or one of his people. Now, I never heard of Jarrett before that trip. That's a whole nother line of related research. Jarrett was like a mastermind of technical intel of ordnance. See, at Fort Greg Adams, they have a lot of ordnance collection. Of course, as some of you probably know, Aberdeen, in Maryland, Aberdeen Proving Ground and that's where Jarrett was. Little David was transferred in May of 23 from Aberdeen Proving Ground to Fort Greg Adams. So it sits there now in that canopy with plans for ongoing preservation and refurbishment. So in that document, and Todd's a historian, so he can tell you how just a document opens a door. That was serial number 4. But it said in there that there were 6 in the contract with Mesta. Of course, these were built at Mesta Machine Company. Now, that just adds something to my list for ongoing research to know if there were any other Little Davids built. Were some failed in the process? Did they get to any others? It's probably this is the only one that was ever built. I am interested to know where there might be other projectiles. There's 2 right now at Fort Greg Adams. It's mentioned in Todd's article. In the research that I had going even before this trip, there was a journal ordnance, 1947 by a McAllister, Big Ammo for Little David. He mentioned that the shells for this gun were made at Babcock and Wilcox Company in Barberton, Ohio. So I'm definitely going to research. We're going to research more about the shells. Of course, it was Mesta Machine Company in West Homestead, PA, where Little David was built as a secret project. manufacture date 1944. Our lead into this was my grandfather, Ralph Edward Grabowsky Sr. See, my main hobby is amateur genealogy. And about 5 years ago, and my dad may have mentioned it before that, but he had, said, your grandpa worked on this gun, and he mentioned to it a few times. And we started to do some research, and we ran into a document on the web. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if it's on the web anymore, and I'll actually forward a PDF to Todd. There was a National Park Service document that was tied to a Monongahela Valley recording project, and it had basically an overview of items pertaining to Mesta Machine Company that were tied to military production and so forth. And we've learned through research that Mesta was a highly rated partner with the government on this. And that document mentioned some things about Little David. So that was like an open door. That was PA-301, Historic American Engineering Record. And I'll send that to Todd at some point. So there's a whole world there, not just about Little David, but about sort of Mesta Machine Company's cooperation and partnership with military industry at that time, particularly, of course, in World War II. Another objective I have, and my father, is to put together sort of a master bibliography of good, primary sources, and then, relevant, credible secondary sources, which will certainly include Todd's article on, and this episode, on Little David, so that researchers, citizens, scholars, journalists, whomever, genealogists going forward will have access to those materials, right? And so that's a goal. Now, as someone who's a genealogist and really inspired that, my grandfather worked on this gun, and my dad sort of had this on his memory. This was something that probably my grandfather could only talk about years later. I want to network and broadcast a bit locally or regionally. I want to find other families whose relatives might have worked on Little David. So that's going to be a real research task, and who worked at Mesta and so forth. Now, I've always wondered too, and this may not be online because, as Todd knows, not every government document's archived. So if you're talking Library of Congress or National Archives, I may need to go on site to find other documents. I've wondered whether there are any government lists of people who might have had, special permission to work on Little David and so forth. Another thing I have coming up, and of course, Todd knows, and some of you may know Andy Masick, Heinz History Center, and he's been a part of this conversation and for us, and he had invited me to submit an article to their magazine, which I'm going to do, end of 24 into 2025. Of course, they have an editorial process of review with research. And then also, thanks to this article in the Veterans Breakfast Club, my father and I have been able to expand our networking. And I can't get into all the details now, but there's a bigger open door for us to do some networking to the Lorenz Iverson family. Lorenz Iverson ran Mesta. And of course, we're dealing with Little David history, Mesta history, West Homestead history, that Steel Valley area in the Pittsburgh area. And of course, we are in constant regular or semi-regular communication with Stephan and Weldon to get at least a chance to go back to Fort Greg Adams, possibly in 2025, do some ongoing research and see. And that was a real privilege because that's not an open access base. Civilians can't just walk on there and say, hey, I want to see guns and what you got under the canopy. So we had to get special permission to do that. Little David, just incredibly significant. It is tied with, and this is mentioned in the article, Mallett's mortar. So sort of the all-time, in terms of caliber, biggest ever. Little David's one of them. It was never actually used in war. So the original idea for Little David that it would be used in the European War in the Siegfried line, but then it turned out they didn't need to use it. And so the next thought was that it would be used in Japan if we would have a conventional invasion, but we didn't. We obviously went nuclear. So Little David never even really went overseas. It ended up in Aberdeen, in Maryland, in the proving ground, and it would stay there with some display. And I'm trying to learn more about that history. And again, Weldon had some materials and ongoing research. So in May of 2023 is when the transport happened. And of course, we were notified about that. The story about this, of course, is in 2019, once we started to see more of a possibility for that history out there. Of course, my dad's a proactive fella, and he kind of, I won't get into every detail, but, you know, just really networking and reaching out to various entities. That led us to the point of just him primarily being such a strong advocate of preserving this gun and the memory of the gun, and just being really persistent, which gave us that opportunity not only to be notified in May of 2023 that they were going to move it to Fort Gregg Adams and that they were going to canopy it. You know, they do have the intention of doing more with it, displaying it, refurbishing it. But for now, obviously, you're dealing with budgets and bureaucracy. But that is their intention. And so we're in that loop. And that was a really big deal for us. So that was really sort of a 5-year journey. And so now, basically, our goal and my goal, his goal, my dad, you know, we're always sharing this article. So hopefully, Todd, you're always watching those web traffic statistics. You know, we're going to make sure that that doesn't go away. But the idea is just to preserve that memory of Little David and the men who worked on it at Mesta. Obviously, Mesta is close to my heart. Other people in my family, extended family, worked at Mesta, not necessarily on Little David. And if you're from anywhere near the Pittsburgh area, you have a sense of that Homestead, West Homestead, Munhall, Whitaker, West Mifflin, and so forth area. You know, you had obviously U.S. Steel Works there, you had Mesta, you had J&L just down the river. This was really so much a part of the industrial contribution of a place like Pittsburgh to the broader war effort and just the good of the United States. And again, so people like Andy Masick and others relying on whatever resources they have available. His staff has been wonderful. Even in just preserving some family history in their archives about my grandfather, Ralph Edward Grabowsky Sr., just working at Mesta. So that's where we're at. If there's anything I missed, that is what it is. But we have some paths here for ongoing research, and maybe besides sharing materials with Todd and maybe doing another follow-up article next year, maybe come back again in 6 months or so and do another update. Thank you to everyone for your service and your support and everything you do for this country.
Thank you so much, Eric, for that very quick history of this remarkable weapon. This is Little David was a mortar, 22 feet long. You could see here's a little guardhouse here. You could gives you a sense of the scale. I think it could throw a 2-ton shell a couple miles. Eric, was that about it?
You know, counts on some of these things vary as you sort through sources. So a projectile was somewhere around 3,650 pounds. Again, accounts vary. And, you know, I've seen, you know, approximately 6 miles if this thing was
6 miles.
Yeah, if this was the capacity. And you see from the Pittsburgh just the size and scale of this and the transportation and the hoisting that would be needed to even fire this thing. By the way, at the bottom of Todd's article, maybe you can put it in the chat, there's an embedded video. We've learned that it works better on a desktop or a laptop, sometimes on a phone. Those sorts of things can be a little clunky, but watch that video.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And thank you. This is a 36-inch diameter barrel. I mean, it's just gigantic. And there's efforts made to have it be displayed, I guess, at Fort Gregg Adams, and keep us updated eventually. Thank you very much. We're way over time. I know that, but I'm very grateful, Eric, for you hanging in there, and for you, Walt,
thank you.
And for all of you veterans who shared your stories tonight. Thank you. And I hope to see you all Thursday night when we do The Lost Airmen of Buchenwald, and then next Monday. Good night, everybody. Take care.